Motor racing in the modern era is great.
That's for all the kids out there who dream the impossible.
Jorge Martin is the 2024 MotoGP World Champion. And for the first time in 93 years, this fabled race is won by one of their own.
However, behind all the huge spectacles that it takes around the world, or the amazing cars that are created, it has a huge flaw. Collectively, racing is a multi-billion-dollar business, one that is almost exclusively for the wealthy, highly expensive, and most importantly, one that normal people such as you and I are almost guaranteed to never participate in.
The number is north of $20 million US. A lot of people don't know that just high-level go-karting starts at $300,000 a year.
The 1974 Formula One season was quite special even by today's standards. The grid featured teams or drivers from every single continent on Earth. There were some household names such as Ferrari, Tyrrell, and Lotus, but there were many more individual small teams and entries. Even crazy to think about, modern-day Zimbabwe had already had a Formula One driver at this point, and the grid featured both genders. Fast forward to today. By some absolute miracle, racing has become more closed off and exclusive than what we had in the 70s, to the point where even the smallest racing teams in Formula One, the World Endurance Championship, Indycar, and even GT racing are manned by millions of dollars and massive crews. One crazy fact is that the cost of running a decent Formula One team in the 70s was around $6 to $8 million. This would be a team that would perhaps get you a few podium places. This same cost today is the average cost that a Formula 2 team spends, and it is even rumored that some Formula 4 drivers are spending up to $1 million in total. That sort of money could be almost enough to run an IndyCar team in the 70s or compete in almost every category available, and perhaps even compete in a number of F1 races as a private entry. So there is an alternative to all of this: sim racing, right? Well, yes, but truth be told, sim racing has also fallen victim to this huge flaw of motorsport. Let me explain. A lot of highly rated sim racing titles such as Assetto Corsa and iRacing have some of the most realistic sim racing experiences, but the realism is mostly on the expensive cars in the game. These include GT cars that race in the World Endurance Championship or Super Formula cars among others, but the more accessible cars that most people use in their day-to-day lives or perhaps in recreational racing are often modeled by fans or third-party teams that are usually small, thus making some of these cars suffer from big in-game problems. A lot of these cars don't feel accurate or real, and their tire models behave differently from real life, thus making sim racing also slightly unfriendly to cost-effective and beginner racing. Thankfully, this seems to be a temporary problem that will most likely get fixed as time goes on. A lot of these problems can be traced to the huge commercialization of the sport. Aside from racing becoming more expensive and therefore less inclusive to people of different financial backgrounds, this whole money thing has taken away something even more vital to racing. Most mainstream motorsport series that are broadcasted around the world have simply become stale. Aside from a few exceptions, most racing series have simply become a lot more boring to watch and look at. While the situation seems to be getting slightly better as time goes on, the spirit of extreme and fun racing seems to be slowly dying. But it wasn't always this way. For quite some time, the first step to competitive racing wasn't found in expensive karting championships. Instead, it was found in grassroots car racing. A bunch of people got together to race totally normal cars for the most part and build a hobby out of it. Not only was this form of racing cheap and easy to get into, but there were times where it could get very interesting. The Hill Climb and Scramble event in Kenya was one example of proper grassroots racing. A number of motorsport enthusiasts mostly brought normal or slightly modified day-to-day cars and bikes to climb a dirt hill and race. For the most part, it was fairly normal. However, it did get crazy sometimes. That right there is a single-seater racing car climbing the hill. Think of it as the modern equivalent of a Formula 4 car climbing up a rugged dirt hill. It wasn't only that, There was also ice racing in the United States.
Ice racing is essentially the least expensive form of motor racing that you can possibly imagine. These cars are on the average 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. Most people would throw them away.
An event which Mexican Formula One driver Pedro Rodriguez won in 1970. And then there was the craziest of them all, the Dakar Rally. A race from Paris to Dakar that had many drivers in its early days who were privateers with very limited resources and relatively cheap machines, but were determined to cross continents and deserts with them. The affordable, fun, and enthusiastic nature of motorsports is something that has been going extinct for the past few decades and has instead been replaced by expensive and business-centered motorsports. Racing is slowly turning into just another sport for the rich, defined by money and closed off to the people without a lot of it. To make matters worse, it's turning more boring and stale. The rugged, fun, affordable, and adventurous nature of racing that inspired many men in the past to drive is slowly becoming a lot more toned down to fit a certain narrative of exclusivity and perhaps a more corporate look that's appealing to businesses. However, proper racing isn't dead yet. There are few racing series left which carry the fun, original, and affordable spirit of motorsport, the most famous one probably being the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Yes, Le Mans, not Le Mans. Le Mans is an endurance racing series with a very huge twist. However, the rules are simple, sort of. All the cars in the event have to cost or be worth under $500. This is excluding safety modifications. Then, penalties are determined by the wheel of misfortune, and this results in some penalties such as having a metallic animal welded on top of your car or writing a lengthy love letter while the race is going on. Winners are then paid in some of the strangest and inconvenient form of currency, such as nickels. Those are just a few rules that dictate the event, and they not only produce some fun and humor, but the racing is also pretty good too. The real cost of running at the 24 Hours of Le Mans is probably about $3,000 to $4,000, and that is an insanely cheap price tag for racing. The community and culture that has been brought up through the 24 Hours of Le Mans is truly amazing. But if you don't fancy the chaotic nature of Le Mans, then there are other championships that offer both affordable and accessible racing. Among these are the 116 Trophy, low-cost racing, and my personal favorite, the Mil Dunas Rally, a Dakar-style motorcycle rally raid across North Africa, which is both affordable, very amateur-friendly, and also one of the best motorsport experiences that you can have. These are only a few of the many racing series that provide racing that is accessible, and there are more of them. However, a lot of them are not talked about, widespread, or receive enough attention and funding to keep them going. And it's such a bummer because these racing series are the hope for many enthusiasts around the world to experience racing. So, what can we do about all this? Well, the first step is to simply talk about these racing series more and make better content in support of them online, therefore giving them the attention that they truly deserve. Formula One, DTM, the World Endurance Championship, Indycar, and NASCAR are all amazing, and they play a huge role in motorsport. But it would be a shame if that was all there was, because for many of us, true racing will not be found under the lights of Monaco with complex supercars and single-seaters, or in the technologically advanced factories in Britain. It will instead be found in small tents and garages with ordinary cars and the determination to chase speed, conquer insane terrain, and ultimately experience car culture to the fullest. That is what I believe should be celebrated.